Hi guys, and welcome back to History, Vision, Success. Now we're going straight back into our essay thematic topic on how effective was Nazi economic policy for the year 13 A-level course. And this is the second video after my first video introducing the topic. Now I'm going to go over in detail in this video the period from 1933 to 1936, the period that we call recovery. Now, remember, this is led by Schacht, who is appointed president of the Reich Bank from August 1934, and he's also the economic minister, an appointment which reassured the economic elite at the time, as he was very, very well regarded and respected. Now, methods. So, Schacht had many methods in order to stimulate the economy. And the first one that I'm going to run through with you is his use of extended public works, work schemes to pump money into the economy and to build homes. Another thing he built was autobahns, which was the really long roads in Germany, a bit like the motorways. So what does he do? Well, we have works paid for by the state to provide contracts for private companies and jobs for workers. So essentially, public spending projects where the money is then going towards private companies to boost business, but also hire employees. We had tax concessions, particularly people like newlyweds were given tax concessions of buying new homes as a scheme to try and stimulate demand. We had Richard Evans has described the autobahns as one of the most durable propaganda exercises mounted in the Third Reich. Photographs were taken to show thousands of workers employed on the projects with modern bridges and viaducts, and they were seen as a visible sign of economic revival and national renewal. So all of this really is kind of building into the idea of propaganda, working alongside this to boost the economic miracle. Now remember, guys, economic policy, improving your economy is all about getting people to spend money. And one way of doing that is simply just by reinforcing confidence. So lots of the things above that I've just gone through were about reinforcing confidence, stimulating people to feel like it was okay to start spending money again, giving the impression of economic boost through photographs, through things like that. Now, in reality, the autobahns actually employed relatively few people, with only 125,000 at peak of construction. Construction then slowed after 1938 and stopped altogether in 1942, by which point only 3,870 kilometers of road had been constructed. Method number 2. Subsidies to private firms to encourage them to take on more workers. So, one of the Nazis' first priorities was to reduce unemployment. They labelled this project the Battle for Work. Large sums of money were spent on the building of roads and public houses. Increased industrial production was stimulated through loans and tax relief to private companies. The idea being, if we can get these private businesses to start building more, start spending more, we can get more money into the economy, we can get them to hire more people. We also had the 1935 Reich Labour Service was introduced, which compelled young men to do 6 months of labouring either in farms or construction. And then we have the introduction of military conscription. Now, in reality, this second method, when the Nazis come to power, the economy is already starting to revive. However, we can prove that their methods did help to reduce unemployment faster. The caveat to that is, if you're putting people into conscription, if you're using something like a Reich Labour Service, if you're taking them out of the employment market for 6 months before putting them back in again, you're creating what we call invisible unemployment, people who don't actually have lasting jobs, but are just taken out of the equation. Now, method number 3. So they put controls on wages and prices to control inflation, and they also ended debt repayments. Method number 4, this is one of the most important ones. So Schacht introduced a new plan in 1934 to control foreign trade and improve the balance of payments. As the economy began to revive in 1933 and 1934, foreign trade increased, and this led to imports growing faster than exports. So more is coming in than is going out. This led to a shortage of foreign currency, which was needed to purchase imported goods. So it's not like today where we have, Revolut, which can transfer your money from dollars to pounds to euros to whatever you need in seconds. You have, currency notes. And Germany at this point only had a limited amount of foreign currency, and other countries aren't going to be wanting to accept German money as payment for things. So they had to decide, what are they going to spend this money on? And at the moment, we have more coming in that we're having to purchase than is going out and we're getting paid for. And that was where the new plan came into place. So the new plan placed controls on imports and access to foreign currency. Schacht initiated a series of trade agreements with foreign currency countries, like the Balkans and countries in South America. And this trade agreement meant that Germany paid for their food and raw materials purchased from these countries with German Reichsmarks. This meant that those countries could then only purchase German goods with that money. So it was essentially like a trade. We'll buy your product, but then you have to buy something back from us. And we're going to ensure that by paying you with these Reichsmarks, which can't be used anywhere else. Method number 5. Again, this is one of probably the most ingenious things that Schacht does, and it's called the Mefo Bill. So, Mefo Bill, this was Schacht's way of stepping towards rearmament, a more kind of durable, long-term process. How do we get there eventually? This is going to start us off. Now, this is what we call deficit financing. This is where the government spends more money than it actually receives in order to expand the economy. This expansion was then supposed to increase tax revenue, which would then in turn fill that gap in the government finances. So you almost trick the economy into thinking it has more than it does, and you spend more than you actually have. But because you're spending more, you're then gaining more in terms of tax and things like that. And then you use that money to go and fill the hole that you left at the beginning. It's a very, very clever financial kind of technique. Has to be managed effectively, though, of course. Now, to finance rearmament, the Nazis needed to borrow money whilst avoiding the dangers of runaway inflation that obviously Germany has already experienced and has no desire to return to. Schacht decides and devises this scheme, which we call the Mefo Bill, and it's a scheme whereby the government can pay for military equipment using credit notes or Mefo bills. These can then be exchanged for cash at the Reichsbank by the company. Okay, so private companies feel confident they would get their money, and the idea is that German government are then paying and giving contracts to these private companies to produce certain items which are needed in rearmament. Rather than paying them with money, they pay them with a Mefo bill, and the private company can go and take their Mefo bill to the bank and exchange it for cash if they want to. However, here's the clever part. The bills had 4% per year interest on them if they retained the Mefo bill for 5 years. So if you kept your bill for 5 years, rather than exchanging it for cash, you're going to get 4% interest per year. If you don't do that, you get no interest. Okay, so it kind of creates an incentive for private companies to hold on to their bills rather than exchanging them for cash. This means the rearmament scheme could be started without actually having the funds to do so. And it also means that rearmament is kept secret, as none of this is appearing on any government accounts because there's no actual transfer of funds or money. Now, by 1937, the government had paid out 12 million Reichsmarks in Mefo bills, which had funded around half of Germany's rearmament program. Okay, so this was probably one of the most ingenious things Schacht came up with in terms of stimulating the economy and stepping back to rearmament. Now, the final method is this idea that actually some groups were just simply pressurized out of employment, which obviously helped other people get into employment. So married women and Jews were no longer allowed to work in public services. We also have the Youth Service RAD, which took the young off the employment register, 400,000 in 1934. And we have in 1935 conscription of all 18 to 25-year-olds. The armed forces grew from 100,000 in 1935 to 1.4 million in 1939. Okay, so from this we can see that if we remove all of these people from our figures, then we're taking out quite a large chunk of society. Now, one of the things, so sorry, I've just got a summary here for you, which I thought might be helpful. So I've got all of the methods, and then in terms of what the method is actually kind of achieving in terms of this restoration of the economy. So the public works was really all about the idea of propaganda and confidence. We have subsidies, which are then trying to reinforce employment. We've got controls, which are controlling inflation, ensuring that doesn't run away. We have the new plan to deal with foreign trade, to deal with the currency issue and ensuring that we don't waste all of our foreign currency. We have MEFO bills, which are dealing with the debt issue. And we have the idea of people being pressurized out of employment, which is helping employment recover. Okay, so that in summary, I guess right there is your 6 methods of Shah's financial policy for recovery, what he does, and then what impact that has on the economic situation. Now, overall, then, Hitler's economic policy at this time restores confidence. By destroying the independent trade unions, he created an atmosphere of dynamism. People felt confident and they felt part of a national unit. They were happy to buy a home or trust Hitler's financial schemes. They believed in him, okay? And they also benefited at this time from the reparations repayment negotiation of Bruning, which had succeeded in ending reparations payments. So all in all, then, by this point, financial policy is going quite well. We have so many, but on the other hand, as you remember, all those things I went through, the reality or the, invisible unemployment, things like that. But I think to a certain extent, under Shah, the economy is allowed to recover. And there are many really ingenious schemes that he comes up with that really do stimulate regrowth and a potential, if we were perhaps to have stuck with him, for quite a successful economic future for Germany. Watch the next video if you want to know about the next thing and what happens next in this story. In my next video, I'm actually going to just explain to you why Hitler succeeded where the Weimar government failed, which is something which could be asked in your question. So I've done a little video on that just to kind of make that really clear. And then the video after, we've got our video on the next phase of economic policy, rearmament. So make sure you go and watch those.